What's going on, guys? MariK here, back with episode 5 of our history of the Dragon Ball Super card game. Today we're going to be covering one of my favorite sets in the game, and honestly, in my opinion, the best theme booster we got. I'm sorry, Bardock, I know. The Tournament of Power. This set gave us all kinds of new archetypes from the Tournament of Power in the Dragon Ball Super series, and just the amount of playability this set had when it first came out was just incredible. You had, of course, our protagonist, the Universe 7. You had the Universe 11 guys with Jiren. You had Universe 6 with the Veggies. And you had Universe 9, I think, with the big alien doggos. And of course, we had other universes sprinkled here and there, but they were the irrelevant, shittily designed, unimportant characters that were just kind of added in so that to kind of enlarge in the tournament, so it wasn't just 4 or 5 teams going at it. While as a whole this set did not give us a whole lot of cards, a lot of support for already existing archetypes, it did give us a few choice cards that were really powerful and made a huge impact on the state of the meta. Red started off with Universe 7 and Universe 6, and this is the point where a lot of people decided to change their diets and became vegetarians. This set kind of created the veggies archetype. Even though we already had the green kale, the green caulifla, and the green kaba, a total of 12 cards was not enough to build an archetype around. This gave us multiple red cauliflas and kales. It gave us a few kabas, but those were just completely useless cards as far as the rest of the game was concerned when building the Veggies package. Red, on the other hand, focused on Vegeta, the Prince of all Saiyans, although that support wasn't really as warranted as the Veggie support was. Universe 7 in red was represented by Saiyan Bond Vegeta. Now, all of the Universe 7 leaders in all 4 colors were granted the keyword Warrior of Universe 7. Basically, it took away the specified costs for all Universe 7 cards. And each of the 4 colors had a Universe 7 leader and then 1 leader for the other main universes in the Tournament of Power. This leader kind of gave you a bit of an attack boost and allowed you to draw a card based on whether or not you had a Universe 7 or a Universe 6 in your battle area. But the leader itself is kind of lackluster. I suppose in a vacuum, with just Tournament of Power cards, it wouldn't be too bad. But again, it kind of just felt like, especially with there being no specified costs with each of the Universe 7 leaders, the Vegeta leader just kind of wasn't up to par with some of the others. The Vegeta Ace card, on the other hand, was much more useful in Universe 7 Saiyan Prince Vegeta. This card was insanely powerful, giving both itself and a Universe 7 or Universe 6 battle card plus 10,000 power and triple strike, so you'd have a 30,000 power with triple strike and another battle card with triple strike as well. A really, really powerful card, but only within its specified archetype. And actually, thinking about it now, if you ran a multicolored Veggie deck with the new support from Set 7, and I can't believe I'm even giving you guys this kind of advice, especially in this video of all things, you could run the Universe 7 Vegeta with the new new blue and yellow Veggie support. Like, it would just... Nope, stop. We're just gonna... A little bit of food for thought there. Then, speaking of the Veggies package, we got a new leader in Lady of Destruction Kale. Unfortunately, she had the generic Set 3 Unawakened side, the Attack Leader draw card, which kind of hindered her usefulness. Her Awakened side was interesting, though, in that it kind of kept your Cauliflas protected due to the permanent ability. But, again, it didn't really... I don't know, it just didn't really seem to do enough, and there were better leaders and much better ways to take advantage of the Veggie package, and with Shugesh and Yellow running around at the time, that kind of became the theme with Veggies. You were running red-green with a yellow leader so you could drop Shugesh, to get free Saiyan plays. The Veggies got a lot of support with this set, but the main ones were actually Bold Super Saiyan 2 Caulifla and Sister Attack Saiyan Kale. Now, any Caulifla that was added to your hand with that green Kaba, you could play it for free. And any Kale that you got, you could just add to your hand. And these cards played off each other so well. If that Kaba had been a Universe 6, Veggies would have been much more dominant than they kind of already were, for the most part. The Kale basically came into play and gave you free draw power every time she attacked. The Caulifla allowed you to play more battle cards, so you could actually play the Kaba, play this Caulifla with his ability, and then play a Kale with her ability. Veggies swarmed ridiculously fast, and running them with Shugesh just made it even faster. Now, Relentless Super Saiyan Kale is a great card. It didn't really get played a lot because Veggies focused more on just swarming and playing 2 or 3 cards with just one card. But it had a ridiculous ability to just be able to wipe the entire board when it was played. Now, again, this is where Barrier kind of became a problem for the card, but it was unique because it would wipe the board on both players' sides, but it would not affect any of your Caulifla cards. So you could have a few cards on the board, play her, wipe the board, wipe out everything your opponent had, and still keep a couple battle cards on your own field to be able to attack your opponent. I thought it was a good card. I still kind of think it's a decent card, but again, it was more about swarming with all the little Veggies than to have the big giant vegetarian to come after us meat eaters. Red is pretty much the only color in the set that actually got support that worked outside of just the Tournament of Power set. We got the Majin Buu Full of Energy, which was a nice addition to Majin Buu decks. You got to evolve it down any red Buu for 3 energy of any color. It had Double Strike, it had Barrier, its activate main was not once per turn, so you could just take every card in your life besides one, gain 5 to 25, 30,000 power, gain all those cards to your hand, and then just completely decimate your opponent. And if you played it with this card, and then still managed to go into Ultimate Evil, there was no chance your opponent was surviving that. Then, on the other hand, we had Foreseeing Hit, which is still a relevant card to this day. Maybe not as much as it was at other points in the game's lifetime, but still a very powerful card now. It's got Double Strike, the ability to look at your opponent's hand and choose 2 cards that you want to rip out and warp them until the end of their next turn is just ridiculous. It's a very, very powerful ability, and being able to see your opponent's entire hand, I highly hate cards like that in any card game. Now, with the Pokemon card game, it's kind of an exception because there's so much draw power in the Pokemon TCG, and you can play so many cards at one time that it's not as much of a deterrent because your opponent's hand is going to change very quickly after you see it. Whereas in a game like this, or even in like the Yu-Gi-Oh days, being able to see every card your opponent had almost guaranteed that you were going to be able to prevent them from playing anything that was going to otherwise just end you. Blue was my personal favorite color with the Tournament of Power because we got a new Gohan leader, and I feel like the Gohan leader was the best of the Universe 7 leaders, or at least for my particular playstyle. And having Gohan get more support just made me and other people I know happy because Gohan is one of my favorite characters. And we got another Piccolo that was actually really good for this this set, and just having better Piccolo cards was really nice as well because this was before Set 4, so it was before we got any actual Namekian support. Then you had the Trio de Dangers. I didn't really play that archetype a whole lot. It did have a very interesting lockdown, but it required you to get all 3 of them on the board, and if your opponent ran cards that attacked active battle, or if they ran, stuff that could get around barrier, it was very easy to disrupt that flow, and the field card was ridiculous. I will give them that, but if you could stop them from getting all 3 of the dogs on the board, then the field card was basically useless. Son Gohan, the leader of Universe 7, was just such a powerful leader. Once per turn, when you comboed with the Universe 7 from your battle area, you got to draw 2 cards. So, now it did suck that you had to combo a card, so you did slightly lose some card advantage, but it meant that you were always getting extra power behind your attacks, and really his unawakened side wasn't even the good effect. It was the awakened side that allowed you to combo with Universe 7 cards that were in rest mode. So you could attack with every single one of your battle cards. And the Universe 7 Blue had a good bit of swarm potential. So you could kind of, fill your board up, attack with all of your battle cards, and then attack with Gohan, combo everything out, combo a Champa alongside it, and you've got a overly powered double strike attacker. I absolutely love this leader. Blue also got 2 extremely powerful finisher cards in Results of Training Son Gohan and Beerus Universe 7 Divine Vanquisher. The Gohan went perfect with the Gohan leader. When you had 2 or more Universe 7 in your combo area, he gained triple strike, and he was already 25,000. Then on top of that, you got to play a 3-drop or less for free that would give you another attack and another extra card to combo for your leader. The Gohan was a really nice finisher. However, Universe 7 Divine Vanquisher was equally nice in his own way. Double Strike's great and all, but his ability to make your opponent discard cards or send cards from their field to the drop every time he attacked was just, it was a different ability, but it was so fitting for Beerus. The only thing that was really dumb about it is the ruling for Bandai they created says that certain areas are considered secret areas. The hand is considered a secret area. I can stand by that. However, they still consider it a secret area if your opponent, even if you have seen your opponent's hand. So, for example, you played Forcing Hit. You've seen everything they have. You then drop Beerus, and even though you know they have cards that equal 6 or more in their hand, it still counts as a secret area, so those cards don't count. So it would only count what was on their side of the board. What I also hated about it is that your opponent could have 10 cards in their hand, and still, because of the game's ruling on that, claim that they don't have enough, and you can't debate it because it's a secret area. Which is a bit ridiculous, because if you have more than 6 cards in your hand, the chances are too high that you have more than 6 energy costs in your hand alone. Even with the few cards we got, or the few cards we were to get, that had 0 combo cost, or 0 cost to play rather, it still just wasn't logically feasible. The ruling to me just seemed kind of flawed, but in the end, I guess maybe it would have made the Beerus too powerful of a card, but to me it makes the most sense for it to work, to where you just know that your opponent has the energy cost. Being able to wipe their board, though, is really nice, especially if they had it, and they had to pitch it. So it forced them to get rid of energy a lot of times, and once they knew you had it, they had to be really smart about what they decided to keep in their hand and what they decided to charge for energy. Bergamo also suffered from Set 3 Leader Syndrome. However, his awakened ability was really cool in that when you had Lavender and Basil, which were the other 2 of the Trio de Dangers, in your battle area, your opponent's leader could not attack their leader. So, kind of like a soft check to the leader doing damage, but there was better cards in the set that kind of prevented them from doing anything at all. So while the leader was kind of like a failsafe, the actual archetype was more of a complete lockdown. When on the board, Basil, Lavender, and Bergamo kind of created like a complete lockdown of anything your opponent could really do. Lavender was the first card you would play. When he attacked, if you had another one, you could KO a battle card. And then with Basil, if there was another one in your battle area, he gained dual attack and gained a little bit of extra battle power. But it was the Trio de Dangers Bergamo that was the main focus, that pretty much said if he was in rest mode, your opponent couldn't attack anything else except him. And when you had the other two in play, they all gained barrier. So not only did you have to attack him, but you also couldn't just get rid of him via skills. And every time he was attacked, he gained 5,000 power for the turn as well. So the more you swung at him, the more power he had, and the harder it was to get him off the board. Granted, cards that got around barrier just completely annihilated him, but at the time of the Tournament of Power release, there wasn't a lot of cards that did that. The deck didn't really do as well because you still had to have all three of them on the board, and with the field card, it completely locked your opponent from even getting their skills from any of their lower cost cards. But once the Ultimate Box came out, and we got the 4-drop Vegito that said your opponent couldn't attack anything but him, it created a hard lock to where if Bergamo and Vegito were both on the board, your opponent could not attack at all. And when they were in rest mode, the Vegito had barrier, and the Bergamo would have barrier as well if you had Lavender and Basil in play. So if that actually happened, you were shut down, and there was no way you were winning the game. Granted, the Vegito costs 4 energy, Bergamo costs 4, and Basil and Lavender cost 2 and 3, so at best, that was a turn 5 play, bar running things like the West Supreme Kai or Objection, things to ramp up to the 5 energy. In my opinion, green was actually the most annoying color to play in this set, just because of that stupid green-haired bitch right there, Ribrianne. Her Universe 2 clown posse was the biggest pain in the ass with all of its stupid discard shit going on. Green for Universe 7, on the other hand, we got some good support stuff here and there, but for the most part, it was lackluster, kind of like with red. You had a few powerful cards. Obviously, the Goku was a powerful addition to Universe 7, but the rest of green, besides maybe the androids, just wasn't a whole lot of support we could really take advantage of. Sharpened Power Son Goku was another instance where we got a leader that had a very unique ability, but it was really hard to take advantage of. He had the permanent that prevented you from adding any non-Universe 7 cards to your deck. That included extra cards. We had the yellow representative Universe 7 Searcher that could add Universe 7 cards to your hand, but it had the Universe 7 trait to it. Otherwise, there were no negates, no extra cards, no nothing that you could play with this leader. His Awakened ability gave you the ability to discard cards from your hand to negate an attack against him. But it only worked once during the turn. And since it was an auto, it happened the very first attack. So you could negate that first attack, but they could also just bluff it out with one really shitty attack from a battle card or even their leader card. Son Goku, Hope of Universe 7, ended up being one of the best battle cards for the Universe 7 deck, although it did require you to run a yellow Universe 7 Goku that came in the set, but with the Universe 7 trait that the leaders had, it didn't really have to, you didn't have to run any yellow because it got rid of the specified energy costs, but this one had triple strike and critical, or triple attack and critical rather, which was just absolutely insane. And if that wasn't bad enough, if your leader card was green, then you could choose a card from your opponent's hand and place it in one of their battle cards and place it in the drop area. So being able to make them discard 3 cards and hit them 3 times for critical was a ridiculous ability. As if that wasn't bad enough, the secret rare that goes along with it is even more ridiculously powerful. Brienne de Chateau was easily one of the most annoying decks to play against in this set. Having the ability to search for her Maiden Squadron cards on the Unawakened side, and then being able to KO battle cards once per turn on the Awakened side. Now, that ability wasn't too terrible because they did have to have both Rosie and Kakunsa in play in the battle area. And as long as you could get rid of them, even the big, fat, maiden bitch card really couldn't do a whole lot to you, but you had to get rid of them and keep them off the board. And considering there was an extra card that kind of revived them from the dead, it was really hard to do, and even more so to get rid of Ribrianne herself. Once your opponent managed to get all three of them on the board at once, it was really difficult to defend yourself against Ribrianne when she came into play. If you had both of them, she would KO a battle card, and then when she attacked, you would have to discard 2 cards from your hand. So not only are you losing 2 cards from your hand from that, and she had barrier, so it was extremely hard to get around her. Then you had the Kakunsa that got dual attack and critical, and then you had Rosie that was also a blocker on top of that. Like, it was just so much to deal with at once that it was really hard to get around all of it. We did end up getting some cards with set 4 that made it a little easier to deal with. In the Bardock that could attack active battle cards and gained attack power, but that was really better off for getting rid of the 2-drop. We also got the Krillin in the World Martial Arts Tournament set that was a 2-drop green that got around barrier. And we now have several cards to get around barrier, so it's not as problematic to deal with, but when the set first came out, it was easily the most annoying thing to have to put up with. Green also had the chance to have some really amazing support for the Android archetype. We did get Energy Guard Android 17, who was a blocker that got switched back to active mode, so you could attack with him and still have a blocker on the board. But that wasn't really enough to help the Android archetype get a whole lot better. It just gave us another 17 target. The Infinite Energy Android 18 would have been a great addition to the deck if they hadn't fucked the card up. Basically, it was one of the one-cost to combo cards, but your leader had to be Universe 7 to be able to play her in rest mode. If they had said Universe 7 or an Android, then it would have been a much better card, and it would have given Android players a lot more to work with. Now, if by some magic grace we get the Android Tournament of Power Universe 7 Wish Leader that we've been asking for, then she would be a fantastic addition. But with a new leader, there's no telling what that would actually give us. So energy reduction may be completely irrelevant at that point. But it would still give us another Android 18 target we could run. And if we did want to run the combo to play cards, it would be a fantastic addition versus running the random generic green garbage that we got from Universe nobody cares about. Then lastly, with yellow, we got the new big strong man, Jiren, and his Pride Troopers, the kind of weird Space Power Ranger ripoff. And Frieza, of course Frieza was going to be yellow. And the Universe 7 Frieza stuff got a little out of hand. It became just the most boring, mind-numbing deck to play against. You almost didn't even play against it. You were more just playing solitaire against a wall, and then still losing in the end. You had to go either really big or really wide to be able to kind of deal with that deck, because it did absolutely nothing and would generate card advantage while you're swinging at it and adding cards to their hand, and you're getting nothing out of it because they are doing no damage to you whatsoever. It also didn't help that they basically gave this Frieza leader a very similar effect to the Gohan leader, except it didn't require him to attack. Instead of having to attack and combo a card, you just discarded a Universe 7 and drew 2 cards. So even for your opponent to get the draw from their leader, they didn't have to attack. There was zero reason to attack you until they got the pieces to just completely annihilate you. And with this leader, you played the 5-drop Yellow Goku, and you played the Secret Rare, and you would just stall. You would just not do anything. Just protect your life, do whatever. You wanted to ideally get down to 4, and then that way on your turn you could play the 5-drop Goku, use the leader to awaken, to switch 2 energy back to active, then you had active energy for the Secret Rare, and then it was just game at that point. And with your opponent not getting your life down to 0, or getting to 0, with your opponent not getting your life down to 4 or less, you couldn't use your super combos. So by the time Victory Strike came out and they comboed everything they had, all those resources you gave them, you were left with nothing to be able to actually stop that attack from going through. It was the most boring deck to play against. And honestly, decks like Veggies were the perfect counter to it. At the time, I was running Universe 4, well, not when this came out, but at the time that Victory Strike Frieza became really popular, I was running Set 4 Namekians, and because that deck can go so wide with so little energy, I was able to just keep doing enough damage that to keep from having to use that Awakening. My opponent was having to combo cards out of their hand and basically left them with nothing left to defend themselves. I think at one point I even forced them to combo the Victory Strike because it was that or death. And even in the end, once Victory Strike is gone, there's not really a win con at that point, and it's just a slow and subtle death. With the set's release, most people were playing the Emperor of Universe 7. It wasn't until later on that people started realizing that Victory Strike was just an easier strategy to play and was a lot easier to win with. It was just, there was so little ways to counter it outside of like blockers and revenge. And the Frieza was ridiculously dangerous in the fact that not only did he have triple strike if your opponent chose to attack with it, which they rarely did, you had to place cards in their life, in their drop, just for them to activate abilities. It was kind of reminiscent of the new Frieza that we have that does the same thing, but in order for them to play a card, they have to, warp shit. And again, it was really just not fun to play against because your opponent would do nothing until they got the energy to play the 5-drop Frieza, and then EX evolve him into this one, and then go, okay, now you can't play the game. It was just a very unfun, not even really an archetype, just a strategy of doing all of nothing. The Tournament of Power set would not be complete without Universe 11's mascot Jiren. This leader was really lackluster. He had Set 3 Syndrome on the front side and Awakened. At the end of the turn, he just chose 2 your Universe 11 battle cards and switched them to active mode. It was no different than running the Galactic Emperor Frieza from Set 1, except, hell, that was a yellow Frieza that you could run Bloodlust with. The leader itself didn't support the archetype at all, besides switching them back to active mode, which I guess in a way, since you did want to keep them on the board, but it was nowhere near enough to actually really benefit yourself to run the actual archetype. All of the Universe 11 Pride Trooper cards served a purpose within the archetype, but a lot of them also weren't necessary. The biggest ones were Ally of Justice Toppo and the Absolute Justice Jiren. Jiren was your ridiculously huge finisher, which is the whole point to the leader unresting battle cards, so that you could keep him on the board long enough to reduce the energy cost of Absolute Jiren, because you weren't going to play him for 10 energy. And the Ally of Justice Toppo getting to play an extra battle card kind of added up to getting enough on the board to reduce Jiren's cost so that you could play him. And being able to choose all of their battle cards and energy and rest mode and place them in the drop was pretty much guaranteed defeat. So if you allowed this Jiren to hit the board, there wasn't really any way to play out of it. I mean, I managed it a couple times, but for the most part, you see that Jiren come out, and if you can't survive the attack, there's no retaliating on the next turn. Now, granted, we do have a lot more negate cards, but even then, we don't really have anything that negates this Jiren's ability coming out besides Cold Bloodlust. Everything that we have right now kind of limits lower cost cards, and so Jiren's just free to reign supreme. He was an interesting archetype to play, and the 10-drop was a powerful card, but when you had the Trio to Dangers lock, and you had the Rebriand discarding all your stuff, you had the Frieza, you had the Veggie package, you had the Gohan stuff, Jiren the support for the Jiren stuff was cheeky, but it wasn't enough to actually get anywhere competitive-wise. Then lastly, we had Son Goku, the Awakened Power. the most expensive card ever to be in the game, and probably the most played secret rare. I don't know if I'd say it's the most playable, but it's definitely the biggest pain in the ass of all. It has Victory Strike, which basically means when it does damage, it auto wins the game. And his permanent says the attack and skill cannot be negated. So, while he doesn't have Barrier, that's more or less irrelevant on your opponent's turn. So, when they're attacking you, you can't drop, your battle cards or extra cards that are just going to blow shit up. Now, granted, when this Goku came out, the biggest strategies to getting around it were Mafuba if you were playing blue, but you could also run the Enraged Gohan Awakening if you were running green, which had a similar effect, but KO'd the battle card. Now, since the attack could not be negated, you could still play those cards, because even without the attack being negated, you would still get the other ability. So Mafuba would trap him for 2 turns, or Enraged Gohan would just straight up KO him. Victory Strike remained and still remains one of the most played decks in a competitive format. Just because, as was with the Frieza leader, you can just sit back and let your opponent do half the work for you. And when you've got your pieces, you just play him and then you just win the game. There have been several iterations of Victory Strike, one of the most prominent being Shenron Victory Strike, when we got set 5. And, so you've got to figure, we've gone through a couple more expansions, a couple more sets as well, and Victory Strike is still one of the most powerful finishers in the game, with a strategy that really doesn't involve a whole lot of work, aside from actually drawing into the Victory Strike. One of the most satisfying ways to get rid of a Victory Strike has been critting it from life, and that's just it's a very satisfying moment. Or even so, when they're playing Shenron, and they go through their Dragon Balls, and go through the life to find the Dragon Balls, you see that it's there, and it ends up, after shuffling their life, it ends up being the last card in their life, and they physically can't win with it. I hate Victory Strike decks, and I'm honestly, I don't ever enjoy playing them. It's as bad as playing the Frieza stuff. It's just so boring and linear and one-sided. Overall, the Tournament of Power set was a fantastic set in a vacuum just by itself. It did bring a few competitive elements and a few other cards that we could add outside of the Tournament of Power itself, but for the most part, if you weren't playing Victory Strike, you really didn't keep up with the Tournament of Power, which is sad because I really enjoyed the set and the themes, and I really would like more Universe 7 Tournament of Power support so that I could, continue to use the Gohan leader, or even if they give us another Universe 7 leader. We did get a few more Universe 7 leaders in the Ultimate box, and the Goku leader in that set is really fun to use as well, as is the 5-drop Goku we got in that box. I would love to see more Tournament of Power stuff, but right now, Bandai seems to be going in a completely other direction, and I just don't see it happening anytime soon. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are people that want more for Universe 2, or Universe 9, or even Universe 11. Universe 6 is obviously getting the most attention, but that's because it was more prominent in the anime, and then, of course, people just happen to love the Universe 6 Saiyans. So, that's about it for the Tournament of Power and how the cards in the game affected the meta. If you guys enjoyed this video, I know a lot of you are loving the series, and I do really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting from you guys on it. I know a lot of you guys are waiting on deck profiles, some of you are waiting on gameplay videos. There's just so much going on right now, and just even getting these videos done is hard enough to do. And I can do these without having to, get my camera working or get a new camera and get people together to actually play games, since I really only have the time to play once a week right now. But we will get those deck profiles up for you guys as quick as we can. With that, we're going to go ahead and get the freak out of here, though, and we will see you guys in the next episode.